The lust for power is not rooted in strength, but in weakness. It's the expression of the inability of the individual's self to stand alone and live. It is the desperate attempt to gain secondary strength where genuine strength is lacking. I feel like this quote from German psychologist Erich Fromm perfectly encapsulates the mindsets of many overlords in Has Been Hotel's version of hell. Sinners whose desire for more power is so great they don't even see others as actual people. Rather, obstacles or stepping stones to overcome are used to help feed this endless greed, creating soul contracts with other demons that allows them to literally own slaves. Nothing ever seems to be good enough for them. They have to keep shooting higher the more they accomplish, no matter the cost. This incredibly dangerous mindset fits nobody else better in the Has Been Hotel cast than the media overlord Vox. Now that Vox's time in the spotlight may be done, or at the very least less common considering how Has Been's second season ended, I wanted to give a more extensive dive into Vox's character, making this sort of like a sequel video to the one I made on him towards the end of the first season. Let's dive into the rise and fall of Mr. TV Headman.
We have the chance to be more than overlords. We have the chance to be gods.
Before his death, Vincent Whittman was but a simple weatherman for an unnamed news channel back in 1950s America, where he'd grown tired of his mundane role as a weatherman and desired more important roles in television. Granted, we never got any reasons as to why Vince became so obsessed with climbing the media food chain in his human life, as his backstory never explored his weatherman life super in depth, like if he had been getting poor treatment from coworkers or anything like that, so I'm chalking it up to he simply wanted more attention and felt like he deserved it more than the others who were in higher positions than him. Where one day Vince would seemingly snap, killing the Ron Burgundy-looking anchorman who was getting the most attention from the station at the time. And because Vince was never caught for this murder, he'd replace Ron as the anchorman. But this still wasn't enough for him. Vince would commit several murders over the years, never got caught, and continue to climb the media food chain. Whether it was a Conan O'Brien type late night host job, Animal Planet hosts, cooking show hosts, or even game show hosts, all of them were expendable to him. Killing those who had no affiliation with him is one thing, but even the ones that were genuinely trying to help Vince got off too. Specifically his old manager, producer, and the head of an unnamed studio CEO. These horrific actions combined with the solo Vox song Brighter is personally some of my favorite visual storytelling in all of Has Been Hotel, with some of the lyrics highlighting how Vox is viewing his actions in the most animalistic ways possible, as if he's an actual shark swimming in the ocean that is show business, and anyone who dies at his hand was simply too weak to cut it. Nothing more than his prey. To him, it was as simple as natural selection. It seemed like Vincent had gotten everything he wanted at this point. Newspapers were calling him the god of entertainment. He was the face and behind-the-scenes runner of a major network, on top of having a cult-like following of employees that was willing to bend to his every whim. However, as he had come so close to reaching the absolute peak of worship he was supposedly after, Vincent was killed by a TV that fell from a wire hanging above his head. I know this isn't the case for all sinners, but I do like how with Alistair and Vox in particular, their demon forms were decided through aspects of their deaths. Vox having a TV for a head in hell when he died because of one, on top of gaining some shark parts like gills on his torso, as a man who really likes sharks. Or Alistair mistaken for a deer when he was shot by a hunter, now sporting many deer-like attributes as a demon. It's definitely a good thing Vox perished when he did in my opinion, as he represents the worst of the media industry cranked up to a cartoonishly evil level, twisting the truth, exploiting/harming others, all while playing innocent in front of the cameras. Reminds me of someone. I can't quite put my finger on it though. It'll come to me at some point, it's all good. Naturally, Vincent would end up in hell because of his serial killer activities as a human. It wasn't as if his lust for power suddenly died though, he still got to work down there. Growing his power mostly solo for a bit whilst making deals with demons like Baxter every now and then. At some point, he'd meet Alistair the radio demon. There was something about Alistair that completely captivated Vox like nobody else has. During his human years, Vox seemed to get enjoyment out of killing other media alumni. None of these people were friends in his eyes, yet he genuinely looked up to Alistair, seeing him as inspiring and maybe even developing some romantic feelings for him depending on the person you ask. Even though the episode about their past aired before Vox's human life's past did, I like how it adds more context to their relationship. Vox may have always been a two-timing snake, but Alistair seemed to be the one exception Vox was willing to make after all this time, hoping Alistair would be willing to form a partnership with the goal of becoming the two most powerful overlords in hell. However, Alistair would laugh uncontrollably at the idea of this team-up, calling out Vox for his reliance on Alistair's power and how friends don't exist in hell, followed by Vox completely crashing out, losing to Alistair in a fight, and sparking a bitter hatred between them that would last for the next 70 years into the present day. Alistair is essentially the root of Vox's insecurities, and it makes sense to a degree why Vox would become so obsessed with what Al thinks of him. To have the only person he seemingly ever looked up to completely shit on his entire existence like that, it's gotta sting. A lot. But there's only so much sympathy a guy like Vox can get from has-been viewers in retrospect after seeing what he was up to as a human. I've said before that the dynamic between these two characters is one of, if not my favorite in Has-Been, as the two of them are so similar in many ways, yet will only acknowledge the similarities when it comes to how they conduct business rather than their true personalities. As both of them are wildly insecure hypocrites. Shocker for villains, I know. But when it comes to Alistair in specific, he's a lot better at hiding it. Making sure people never know too much about his past, specifically the deal he made with Rosie, which was the reason he became the radio demon so quickly after dying, as well as constantly putting on a smile even if he isn't actually happy in a given situation. Because as he said himself, a smile is the perfect way to show, or at least give the illusion you're in control of the interaction with someone else. A practice he seemed to be doing all the way back during his mortal days. So getting under Vox's skin just off a smile alone was incredibly easy for Alistair. After Vox was defeated by Alistair, he would continue to build his media overlord brand over the next 70 years, forming more partnerships in the process, most notably with the porn overlord Valentino and social media influencer Velvet, where the three of them would form the overlord group, the V's, as well as creating the Vox Tech company, known for selling mostly electronic products like TVs, computers, and security systems. Systems Vox would have placed all over Pentagram City to always keep eyes on people he either didn't like or thought he could get value out of. Their combined power more or less gave these three a monopoly on the entire media industry in the Pride Ring. Due to their status as sinners, their influence to reach outside the Pride Ring is impossible because of how hell works with sinners. So unfortunately, they'll never be able to have the same amount of clout as Mammon or even Fizzarali, for instance. Fizz is so popular, even Val has a robot servants modeled after him, but I digress. I imagine Vox's god power ambitions had still lingered in the back of his mind for a bit, but it was one of those things where the power dynamic between heaven and hell made it extremely difficult for him to rise in power at the same level of his human days, as heaven held more authority in the afterlife, and it was taken to the next level 7 years before the events of Season 1 when the extermination days began, allowing angels to come down to hell once a year to slaughter sinners under the guise of controlling hell's population. But we know if it were up to the Exorcist, they'd wipe out the entire sinner population down there if they could. The combination of these factors forced Vox to become complacent with what he had. Sure, he'd garnered lots of respect as an overlord, but it still wasn't quite on the same level as his cult leader power on Earth. The demon he got closest to is Valentino, for sure, where the two of them developed a situationship of sorts. Vox in particular seemingly treating it more like a casual fling, while Val had more of a emotional attachment. Even though these two are pretty much the worst, their over-the-top evil antics make them very entertaining together, which is something I appreciate with cartoons in general, as even though a lot of the concepts these guys represent can be applied to very serious real-world issues, especially Val, there's no denying their abhorrent behavior for just being themselves together gets people talking. Because a lot of what these guys do to other characters have traumatic ties to them that some people watching the show have had actual experience in real life. So when abuse victims see both Valentino and Vox, as of late Season 2, treating angel dust like that, it's more likely emotions will be brought up for certain folks as opposed to Adam or loot taking place in demonic genocide. Doing that isn't as personal compared to what Vox and Val do to people, if that makes sense. I'll leave it at that as someone who doesn't really have the proper means to decide whether the portrayals of these issues lean more in the acceptable lane or the opposite, but I still stand on this montage being an odd choice. On the more positive side, the parts where Vox has to be the level-headed one to calm down Val's tantrums is entertaining to me. Vox sometimes feeling like a babysitter to his other partners who will go off the rails like tearing apart models or getting into song battles with Carmela Carmine. It's like Vox is the older sibling constantly intervening when the younger siblings are stepping out of line. Genuinely fun stuff. Vox had been chilling for the most part though, until the day he found out Alistair had returned.
That fucker is back!
Alistair was AFK for about 7 years. No radio broadcasts, no public appearances of any kind. All at the order of his master Rosie, who still never revealed the reason why Alistair had to disappear for that specific time. I'm hoping it still has something to do with Lilith since the timing lines up despite her not being Alistair's owner, because I'll be kinda tight if Season 3 doesn't clear this up. Vox learning about Al's return sent him completely over the edge for the rest of that day. The demon he looked up to, despised, and feared was back. Vox had no problem oozing confidence in front of other demons both on and off camera, but the moment Alistair gets involved, he absolutely crumbles, and I love it. What went from a checkup on Val to quell his tantrum turned into Vox going on a smear campaign against Alistair, dragging his name in every way he can think of, only for Alistair to come back on the air for the first time in years, destroying Vox without even trying. Al managed to stay cool, calm, and collected, while Vox spiraled further. With all this going on, Vox would now prioritize sending someone into the Has-Been Hotel as a spy to prevent Alistair from striking any deals with Charlie. You gotta love how much the tables have turned. It went from Vox telling Val not to go over there because they have to protect their brand of perfection, but then Alistair shows up, He's got to send someone over there immediately. And it really highlights the chokehold Al has on this guy even further, dropping all his other business ventures to spy on the guy that rejected him. Vox would initially suggest Angel Dust to go in there due to his pre-established contract to Val, but because Angel's been dodging Val's texts for a good reason, Vox turns to Sir Pentious, who initially fakes wanting to go down the path of redemption, does turn over a new leaf after Vox was willing to throw him out like trash when Angel found the hidden cameras Pentious was trying to install. With that plan failed, on top of Alistair mocking Vox's attempts to get the upper hand, he'd have to think of something else. But luckily for him, Angel started showing up to V Tower again for shoots, allowing Vox to hypnotize Angel when he was drugged out of his mind with the purpose of sending Vox incriminating information about the hotel. Vox would lay low until the day the next extermination would take place, preemptively spying on their battle preparations and only knowing this was going to happen thanks to Angel's intel, where he'd revel in the possibility that Alistair would die that night at the hands of an angel. Seeing this guy's reactions to Adam vs. Alistair was comedy gold. It was nothing but angry white dad watching his team playing in the Super Bowl energy, making lots of good plays at first, only to shit the bed later. Comparison obviously isn't one-to-one here, as Vox doesn't like either of the parties involved, but he'd rather see Alistair die than the angels lose. Keep that in mind for later. It wasn't until Nifty killed Adam with an angelic knife that changed everything, because it proved both normal exorcist and archangels could be killed using any kind of holy fueled weapon. This one act changed everything for both hell and heaven, as heaven's fear of hell rising to power like during the days of Lilith was becoming more likely by the second, while the majority of hell wanted nothing more than to take revenge on those who committed genocide on their people for the past 7 years, thinking they'd be able to learn how to kill angels if they checked into the Has-Been Hotel. But Vox was more informed than the average sinner. He knew what the hotel was truly about and wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to gain power over heaven. For the first time since arriving in hell, Vox was given a second chance to reach the godlike status he was so close to reaching as a human. The biggest factor in making sure his plan would work is if the Has-Been Hotel wasn't getting any business. Someone like Vox was able to take advantage of Charlie's insecurities about living up to her mother's legacy at the same level Alistair ragebaits Vox, using all his media outlets to twist the truth and paint Charlie in the worst light possible as someone who hates any sinner who doesn't want to check into the hotel. It's one of those things where Vox is a relatively smart, calculating guy who only really loses his cool when it comes to Alistair, but he's not that smart. Rather, the people he's trying to knock down a peg don't have their own shit figured out. By the time Vox and Velvet pulled up to the hotel for a walkthrough, Charlie had already known Pentious was up in heaven through Emily. Yet because cell phone service up there is selective or something, I don't fucking know, Charlie was unable to show any physical proof he was actually redeemed, where the only thing she could think of to prove herself to Vox is putting Angel through a redemption speedrun arc, which also failed miserably as she kept trying to treat his path to redemption the same as Pentious. It ain't gonna work the exact same way twice, man. They're two completely different people who committed different sins in life. Charlie's obsession with getting people's approval of the hotel and belief Pentious was still alive did nothing but make things worse, playing right into Vox's hands. Even the hotel mainstays were starting to distance themselves from Charlie because of how self-destructive she was acting. Her heart may have been in the right place, but the specific actions weren't. Angel would pull back a bit, Vaggie would argue with Charlie to take it easy, and Alistair full-on quit, as his loss to Adam kept eating away at him and made it impossible to focus on anything else. This was the last piece Vox was missing to start his final rise to power as the strongest overlord in hell. Alistair would not only challenge the V's to a fight, but strike a deal with Vox when cornered, agreeing to act as his prisoner as long as he doesn't lay his hands on Charlie. While it seemed like a questionable decision on the surface, Alistair was banking on Vox crashing out to the point where he'd lose all his support in the end, constantly riling him up about how he needs the support of others to get anything done, and because Vox cares too much about what Alistair thinks despite always saying otherwise, he starts to treat Val and Velvet less like friends and more like employees far below him. Even before this, Vox did technically hold more influence in Pentagram than them, but he wasn't against sharing the spotlight until Alistair came into the picture. Or rather, he was a lot more comfortable with swallowing his pride, because his selfish tendencies would slip out in the Has-Been Guarantee song how they should, only trust him, not all the V's as a unit. Yet in the Once We Get Up There song, they sang in a more united front, with Vox seemingly having no problem sharing his dream of godlike status with those two. I don't know, it's weird. With the more influence Vox secured, the less he'd want Val and Velvet partaking in frontline appearances, asking Val to sit out of the rally until the very end, or forcing Velvet to apologize to Carmilla for the way she acted towards her in season 1. It got to a point where he was only interacting with them if he needed something, and they were both getting sick of it. This didn't really bother Vox that much though, because he was still getting what he wanted. The majority of the sinner population was willing to listen to him, other overlords respected him more, except Zestial, and it was all under the guise that he was someone who was for the people and sought out their best interests, while Lucifer and Angel couldn't care less what happened to sinners. Crazy thing is, Vox was kind of spitting here. Lucifer has said on record more than once how sinners are the worst, so pulling up to the rally to intimidate Vox like that as a being with angelic powers is only helping Vox's narrative about how angels are still out there to get sinners after Adam's death, when in reality the only one who still lusts for demon blood is Lut. Oh, Lut. How this season burned you. Maybe I'll get more into that in a different video, we'll see. But even though Lucifer can outsmite Vox, and Vox knew this before Lou even showed up thanks to Angela's intel, Lou showing up at all was enough to push Vox's agenda further. Only getting worse for Charlie's side when the main Angel crew pulls up with the gift baskets as an apology for genocide. I'm glad the show was self-aware enough to point out how insane this gesture was through Vox's speech. Even still, it's crazy to me anyone from that side thought this would be a good idea. I guess you could argue this was done as a way to illustrate how disconnected from reality the denizens of heaven truly are. While they are genuinely trying to make peace, they still don't see the lives as sinners as equal to theirs. So at the time, the gift basket idea wasn't that bad, maybe. Vox calling them out on this behavior, on top of Lute and Sarah crashing out about how sinners like Vox are the reasons the extermination started in the first place, was the straw that broke the camel's back. Vox was able to officially declare war on heaven, striking a deal with Carmilla Carmine to build an angelic doomsday device strong enough to blast the gates of heaven open, prying on her moral code of wanting to protect her loved ones and not being able to do that if she doesn't side with him, as well as guilt-tripping her by saying she was the reason all of this kickstarted in the first place when she killed that angel last year. Not wrong, by the way, because Charlie's side never would have had the balls to stand up if they, still believed angels were indestructible. Vox got Lucifer to fall for his trap to become the weapon's source of power too, due to Lucifer's bumbling dad nature of trying to please Charlie at any point. Vox impersonating her was all it took. Again, the way these characters fell into Vox's hands this season is almost comical. Like, Lou, I understand you want to make up for what you did at the rally, but how did you not realize how suspicious this whole situation was? I know you and Charlie were never super close, but surely you'd know better that this is something she'd literally never do. Vox really seemed to have it all by this point, now that the super weapon powered by the King of Hell was powerful enough to blast the gates of heaven open through the barrier Sarah put up in episode 2. Charlie's last-ditch effort was to team up with Emily and use Baxter's previous connections to Vox Tech to hack Vox's broadcast so Sir Pentious can prove he's still alive. Charlie was able to get easy access to this final hoorah because Vox personally invited her with the hopes of her bowing down to his agenda, as he felt like she had nothing more she could possibly do to take him down. Though things don't work out in that area at first either, because Val and Velvet intervene. So Vox gloats at Charlie's failed attempts to push her cause and how Lilith would have been disgusted with the way Charlie turned out. To add insult to injury, Alistair uses the deal he made with Charlie to force her into calling Vox the strongest sinner, thus breaking his deal with Rosie and Vox because Vox put his hands on Charlie's shoulders. Which, depending on the person you ask, was either very good planning or a fluke on Al's part. At first, I thought it was a fluke, but I feel like if you pay attention to Vox's mannerisms enough throughout both seasons, there's enough cause to prove he's an incredibly touchy guy and was bound to do this at some point, especially since he assumed laying the hands on Charlie clause of the deal meant he couldn't hurt her, not touch her in any kind of capacity. At this point, Vox went completely off the rails. Their fight was insane, by the way. I will admit, Al beat some of the Fraudgations with season 2's finale. He really did. All he wanted to do was to use his new power to kill Alistair by any means necessary, even if it meant using the angelic weapon and causing tons of collateral damage in the process. This was enough to convince the sinners who rallied against him all this time that he never gave a shit about empowering them at all, only boosting himself through the ranks. Once again, everything came back to his obsession with Alistair. He was willing to throw away everything he'd worked for if it meant Alistair was dead and gone. This was even enough for Val and Velvet to finally stand up to Vox. They were not about to die over some bullshit grudge Vox refused to let go of. Val would rip the TV head off Vox's body, attempting to flee the scene, only sticking around to help Charlie's group stop the weapon from overloading because they didn't want to die. All the while, the headless Vox would watch in despair as the plan he worked for the entire season came crashing down. Vox has seemingly lost everything after this day, with Katie Killjoy saying the Vox Tech company might need a name change, as well as Valentino on TV claiming to have never known Vox at all. In the end, Vox may have been declared the strongest sinner in name, he was still weak where it mattered. Thank you guys for watching this video on one of my favorite Has-Been Hotel characters. For those curious how I got this done on the faster side, I was scripting parts of this video over time as the new episodes were coming out, so the finishing touches didn't take me that long to get done. If you'd like to see videos like these on other characters from the Helliverse or different cartoons in general, be sure to let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out, take care, bye-bye.